안녕하십니까? 예, 김준영입니다. 네, 영어로 하겠습니다. I was ordered to run this panel, English. So, yeah, especially I was really worried because this time of the slot is kind of, party's over kind. So people are leaving, but a lot of students came. So you saved the day, and thank you very much. You're the future of our country. Okay, this is very important, I think. It's very important issues. And alliance, on the one hand, we have to ask the fundamental questions because strengthening U.S. ROK alliance is always true. Unquestionable, value is almost common sense. But as we, witness in the Middle East, sometimes alliance, only because of, because it is alliance, Qatar and Bahrain and Saudi, they're hit by the enemy of the U.S. That means, they're kind of perplexed because they have been thinking alliance is a protection. But now they're questioning, it can be a risk. So actually already theorists of alliance pointed out that. We call it classic dilemma of alliance between abandonment and entrapment. We Korea always worry about the first part, abandonment. What if U.S. leave the country and that we alone, left alone to protect ourselves is called abandonment. But now we have to worry about the other side, the second aspect of alliance, with entrapment. For example, Taiwan Strait, if something happened there and U.S.-China clashes, I don't think China attack mainland of U.S. And also base in Korea is the first target. So that means without considering our situation, we can be drawn into the crisis. Just like, very similar to what's happening in Middle East. So, and issues like today's issues, nuclear power submarine, and nuclear proliferation, North Korean nuclear development. And other than these issues, for example, wartime OPCON transfer, all those issues interrelated to each other. So maybe we are facing the, very turning point. And we have to assess. It is the right time to assess our alliance. So we have a wonderful lineup of panelists today. Korea and U.S. I know it's a very painful to sit here to listen to very difficult discussions when outside the weather is so perfect, especially beautiful in this Jeju Island. But anyways, we have to dig into very important. Maybe it can be a life and death problem. So, as I introduced, and we have four wonderful specialists, scholars, and former diplomats. We are going to discuss in-depth issues, and I'm going to introduce each one right before their presentations. Okay? First, Ms. Euihae, sorry about that. She is Deputy Minister of Political Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Korea. She's acting and serving diplomat, and she has diverse on-the-ground experience and expertise. She was also a professor at KNDA, Korean National Diplomatic Academy, where I used to be a chancellor. Of course, the time was not overlapped. But anyways, and she also is in charge of Indo-Pacific agendas. So I'll give you 10 minutes for panelists. Is it? Yeah, and then we're gonna have, after the presentation, we're gonna have my question and the question from the floors. Yeah, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Kim. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to see colleagues, former bosses, and friends here. So I better choose my words very carefully. So as our moderator has stated, this really is a historic turning point in our alliance, and I completely agree. This is really an important chapter in our alliance. What began as a security alliance 70-some years ago now has become one of the world's most comprehensive and I believe effective strategic partnerships. And so today's topic, assessing our alliance in terms of modernization, nuclear-powered submarine, and civilian nuclear cooperation, this is really relevant because I think they're all part of a broader question that our moderator has raised of how do we ensure that an alliance built for the 20th century remain relevant in the face of such uncertainty in the 21st. I don't need to mention that the alliance has continued to evolve from a conventional military alliance to one encompassing economic cooperation, technology, development, everything from global health and innovation. It's really served us well. I mean, just looking at Korea in terms of providing us with the security and stability to grow into a thriving democracy, as well as a linchpin of peace and stability here in Northeast Asia and beyond. This alliance continues to be the cornerstone and bedrock of Korea's foreign policy, no doubt. Looking back where Korea was 70 years ago and where we are now, I think for the US as well, it would not be an exaggeration to say that this is really the crown jewel of US foreign policy, a really epitome of success. And Secretary Mark Rubio has stated, the old world is gone, and I'm afraid it's not coming back. This is really an apt description of the complexities that we are facing today. And before I delve into the three specific topics, let's just note three structural changes reshaping our strategic environment, and some of them the moderator has mentioned. Well, North Korea continues to advance its nuclear and missile capabilities in both quantity and sophistication. That is unprecedented. This is really truly alarming for all of us, not just on the Korean Peninsula, but also in Europe, as our security is so interlinked. So deterrence now requires stronger integration between our forces, faster decision making, and really robust policy coordination like never before. Second, security and economics have become so intertwined that they are no longer distinguishable or separable. Semiconductor supply chains, critical minerals, energy infrastructure, data networks, they now directly affect our national security. I can't count how many hours I spend poring over documents listing critical minerals and where our supply is at. So this is something very, very new. Third, emerging technologies from everything from AI to quantum computing to autonomous systems and space capabilities, they are transforming the nature of competition among the great powers and others in itself. So in this environment, modernizing our alliance is nothing short of ensuring that our alliance remains agile, innovative, and capable of addressing challenges that simply did not exist when our alliance was first established. It also signifies on the basis of course, a robust US security guarantee, including extended deterrence, that ROK is ready and able to play a bigger role in taking our responsibility of defending ourselves and also making a contribution to the alliance. This was reaffirmed by both leaders of Korea and the US at their summits as well as their recent encounter along the margins of the G7. So in this context, nuclear-powered submarine is really a key element of ROK's long-term effort to assume greater responsibility and shoulder greater burden of the alliance, while further strengthening the alliance. Having nuclear-powered submarines will significantly enhance ROK Navy's endurance, operational reach, and provide more credible capability to deal with North Korea, to deter, detect, and track North Korea's activities. I'm happy to note that consultations on the joint fact sheet have begun. Working groups are launched, and we will begin in earnest to implement the joint fact sheet, which is really a historic document. I think we have not attempted anything like this ever before, so it will be a historic endeavor. Another important pillar identified in the joint fact sheet is deepening our civilian nuclear cooperation. The AI revolution is accelerating, so reliable, affordable power source is the strategic asset. Nuclear energy is, of course, emerging as a key pillar of both economic competitiveness and national security, stressed on the latter. And I believe that ROK and US, we are uniquely positioned to become indispensable partners across the entire nuclear value chain, from reactor engineering, technologies to fuel supply, and global exports together. This is not simply an industrial initiative, it's a strategic investment in the future of our alliance, energy security, and long-term competitiveness of both partners. So we will consult very closely with the US on practical ways to enhance fuel supply resilience and spent fuel management as well, which is integral to this whole process. Of course, at the same time, we remain fully adherent to our shared non-proliferation commitments. All this is really to say that our alliance needs to connect not just our armed forces, but our industries, our researchers, our research institutes, and scientists, strengthening cooperation across domains such as AI for defense adaptation, cybersecurity, resilient supply chains, and trusted digital infrastructure. So the strength of our alliance will be measured in not only what we deter, but what we enable, which is innovation, growth, shared prosperity, and resilience. I think the moderator has put forward some very difficult questions. The dilemma of alliance, abandonment, entrapment. There are complexities always around a relationship as robust and as substantive as the ROK-US alliance, but we believe that this is certainly a worthwhile endeavor, and closely consulting on all the sensitivities and difficult issues around reforming and modernizing alliance is a task that we simply have to fulfill to the best of our abilities. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for excellent presentation. You know what? I made a mistake. I didn't introduce myself to you. Okay, I'm a representative, a member of the National Assembly, and belong to Standing Committee of Unification and Foreign Affairs Committee. But I became a politician just 2 years ago. I was a professor at college for 25 years. So as you know, when I really suffered politics, struggle, and I always missed my old job. And this surrounding is kind of seminar, so it's just stimulates my nostalgia. And anyways, thank you very much. Second panel, Dr. Eliot Kang, a leading figure. Okay, he's right now he's a member board of directors Stimson Center, which is very renowned think tank based in Washington D.C. And he was a former assistant secretary for international security and nonproliferation, U.S. Department of State. And he is a leading figure in the U.S. nonproliferation arms control diplomacy. And Dr. Kang also played the central role in the six-party talks and the multilateral effort in Iran's nuclear agenda. Yeah, as you can see, can have a conclusion that he's specialist of this area. So are we expecting very good presentation from you? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Representative Kim, and thank you, Deputy Minister Chung, for excellent laydown of the alliance dynamics and significance of the topic that we'll be talking about. But I want to say a few more things about my background, which I hope will help you understand where I'm coming from with regard to topics we'll be discussing today. Beyond dealing with problematic states such as whether it's Iran, Syria, DPRK, Libya, and I've been focusing on nonproliferation and arms control for over 20 years at the State Department. But also, I have been working very closely with the IAEA and nuclear industries worldwide, because part of the NPT is, okay, we have a sort of a compact that we want to nuclear weapon state to eventually disarm their nuclear weapons and prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. But we also promote peaceful uses of nuclear energy. So I have been charged, because State Department leads the civil nuclear cooperation agreements with different partners of ours. I've been very deeply involved in the renewal of the 123 agreement with, 123 is the civil nuclear agreement, with Republic of Korea about 10 years ago. So I have memories of that. And if not myself personally, my experts under my leadership have led renewal of civil nuclear cooperation with China, Russia, and I myself, because of the importance of the political relationship with Vietnam, I led that negotiation myself, and most recently with Singapore. So, and let me start this because Representative Kim, I think very rightfully brought the dimension or the dilemma of alliance, that of abandonment and entrapment. So this brings me to, well, I have my younger son is a China specialist. He's now studying doing his master's degree at the Georgetown School of Foreign Service. And he's been going back and forth to China, and he's focusing on security studies. And he looked at the program for this panel. And he says, well, how does this hang together? You got civil nuclear cooperation, and then you have North Korea's emerging increasing nuclear threat, and you have nuclear submarines. And he's saying, well, I could see, Korean nuclear submarines helping against our containment of China, right? Interesting, right? I mean, a lot of ways, a lot of American security specialists think about the South Korean desire for nuclear submarines. They're not thinking that somehow these nuclear submarines will be dealing with North Korea, which in many ways it's a sort of a phantom threat to a lot of them, right? But they're definitely thinking about needing all the help with regard to containing China, right? Another thing that it's worth letting you know for the sake of discussion is that I led in the intense interagency work before all became public, because it was kept extremely confidential and secret until it was made public, I headed up a very small State Department team in the run-up to the announcement of AUKUS. So I was deeply involved in working with Australians, UK, the IAEA, and the interagency to make sure that we had a successful AUKUS launch. And in that context, some of the comparison makes a lot of sense, so I will bring those up. I think I want to say, on the record here, that for diplomatic and political reasons, I support South Korea's desire to have conventionally armed nuclear submarines. Right? Now, we could debate about the security dimension. For what purpose? Is it the right type of system? Right? And in this context, I'll share with you, throughout my career, I have worried a lot about China. Certainly regard to strategic weapon systems and things like that, but I also track conventional arms buildup around the world. And you see when you do a popular survey of the press, certainly YouTubes and things like this, you see highly excited commentators on the Chinese launch of aircraft carriers, and also increasing numbers of nuclear-propelled submarines being introduced. But I must say, what I worry most about, let's say if I'm watching a YouTube presentation of various threats that are presented by the Chinese military-industrial complex, actually it's not so much that. I'm sure you've seen these Chinese robots, right? They're running a race, right? They're trying to do a task and they collapse, roll down the stairs. It's really comical, right? But that's what I worry about. When you look at it around the world, right? The nature of warfare is changing. The next major war, God forbid, in this region, will be nothing like what all of us are planning for, right? So I think we need to look very carefully at the lessons of Ukraine and also Iran. It's interesting that the Soviet, I'm sorry, I go back to the Cold War. So the Russian Black Sea Fleet has been totally immobilized, right? And rendered useless in a current conflict, right? It's about production. So when I see, again, YouTube presentation of all the Chinese commercial drones doing incredible things, acrobatics and everything, well, you marry with AI, right? And network warfare, right? That's the future. You're going to have undersea versions of this, right? And to the extent that nuclear power is involved, right? We're talking about nuclear batteries on these undersea vehicles that have persistent station, right? Long, well-positioned, right? And they will activate when they're needed, right? So I have, from personal perspective, some doubts about where all of these things will play out, which also includes AUKUS, because AUKUS 1, that Pillar 1 is all about nuclear submarines, but I don't know how well this is understood in this region, but we also have Pillar 2 of AUKUS, which is intense industrial cooperation on production of these emerging technology-enabled weapon systems, right? And I think that's the more important aspect of it, right? And here I think there's a tremendous complementarity between, of course, United States and the ROK, particularly in nuclear energy. And this is what I explained to my son. Nuclear energy is not just energy, right? This is a core, it's going to be core foundation of enabling the fourth industrial revolution, right? Renewables simply will not be enough. And we have witnessed in the past decade the danger of depending on fossil forms of energy, right? And two of us are leaders in this area. And I wish I had more time to expand on this. Unfortunately, the history of civil nuclear cooperation has been a very rocky one. It's been more competitive, right, than really cooperative. But both of us have elements that are truly, truly synergistic, right? And we can be a dominant player in the world together. Right now, China is poised to overtake the United States, and combination of what Russians are willing to do. If we don't act now, they will dominate the civil nuclear energy throughout the world. But we need to get our act together. Now, bringing this conversation back to conventionally armed nuclear-propelled submarines. Like I said, I support it for diplomatic and political reasons because it's important to the alliance. Korean people want it. Leadership has spoken that this is important, so I support it. But if we do it right, if we do this cooperation right, just as was the case with AUKUS, we could actually strengthen non-proliferation. Again, we don't have the time to go really into depth about this, but if we do it right, you know, I'm sure China and Russia will criticize, oh, you're spreading, you know, nuclear knowledge and ultimate nuclear weapons just like you're doing with Australia. Nonsense. The way we have worked AUKUS with the IAEA, it's going to make actually non-proliferation tighter as a result of that cooperation. So, and more importantly, what seems what the Koreans want is that you want to build your own submarines. And you have the capability. You've been building very good conventional submarines. First with German technology, and you have made it better in many ways, larger. And you have reactors in the works that could be fit into these hulls that Korea is extremely adept at building. What you need is something called HALEU, high-assay, low-enriched uranium for fuel, right? United States, we're in a path to massively expand the supply of HALEU. This is not for military use on our part. This is going to fuel the renaissance of nuclear reactor building in the United States. All novel forms of so-called fourth-generation small modular reactors, many of them, require either some type of more enriched LEU up to HALEU, or some unique, again, I can't go into details about this because it's so deeply technical, a fuel called TRISO, which everybody wants in their small modular reactor. It requires HALEU. Right now, all of those reactors that are so promising can't get started unless we have enrichment capability and production of these HALEU, right? United States is on the cusp of building out some of these capacity to do so. This is where ROK can help. Be part of that build out, right? And become part of the expansion of that because you need it for your industry and the new reactors that are coming, right? So if we do this right, this also protect the non-proliferation aspect of cooperation with Republic of Korea, right? Because you're not making your own HALEU, right? Because that would immediately get flagged, right, by all your neighbors, right? I'm sure absolutely North Korea will notice when you start to produce or want to produce HALEU, and absolutely China, right? Not to mention Russia or everybody else who's watching the world and cares about non-proliferation. So I want to be optimistic in terms of being able to achieve on a technical and political aspect of cooperation in the submarines. But I want to end with this one last bit of cautionary advice, if I may. You have to be patient. There's been a leadership agreement on cooperation on submarines, right? However, the cooperation governing the cooperation between the United States and the US, it is embedded in law. In fact, one of the most well-defined and staunchly respected law called the Atomic Energy Act, right? So we need to modify that. And the executive branch alone cannot do this, right? Any approval must come from Congress. So Congress has to be involved, right? So it's not simply up to the executive to say, yeah, make it happen, this is gonna happen, right? And also, if we get that done, because you'll be using HALEU for military purpose, right? But it's not for weapons, but nonetheless for military purpose, there's going to have to be a negotiation between the United States and ROK on a new mutual defense agreement. And this is precisely what we had to do with Australia, and we had to modify that with the UK. And we are, as you know, there are no closer allies. We have collectively together shed blood together in the millions of our citizens over the years, over the centuries, if you will, right? And under intense pressure from the Prime Ministership of Australia, UK, the Presidency of the United States, it took more than a year, and it's still, things are being worked out, and things are not settled at the IAEA. And I just had a private conversation yesterday with Rafael Grossi when he was here. That's going to take years to play out. In fact, in that context, you're going to have China and Russia doing all kinds of things to try to make diplomatic problems in that context. So I just want the Korean public to be aware of the challenge that's ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kang. You can tell how much expertise he has, and it's explain it in an easy way, easy to understand. Actually, you know, I said I was professor, so I cannot, you know, pass, not without explaining to students about the AUKUS, okay? Because it's important in our discussion. So I'll explain in Korean a little bit. Okay. 학생들 AUKUS는요, 압니까 원래? AU, 오스트레일리아, UK, 영국, US 합쳐서 AUKUS 동맹이라고요. 2021년에 삼각 동맹을 만들었고, 그 중에 가장 중요한 게 원자력 잠수함. 우리가 지금 하려고 하는 핵 잠수함을 만들기로 했던 거라서 우리가 지금 핵 잠수함을 만들 때 그것과 항상 연결돼서 생각할 수밖에 없다. 예, 오케이. Yeah, you know, you have a smart son. I think your son is going to excel your career. Okay, anyways, thank you very much. Okay, next presenter is Professor Susan Thornton. Actually, she is so famous that doesn't need any explanation. But anyway, she's right now a senior fellow at Yale Law School, former acting assistant secretary of state for East Asia and Pacific Affairs in U.S. Department of State. Professor Thornton is a retired senior U.S. diplomat with almost 3 decades of experience with the U.S. Department of State. Yeah, I met her yesterday morning, breakfast time, and I think the organizer of the Jeju Forum almost abusing her to put every session to listen to. So how many sessions you already did, or I hope this session is the last one? But anyways.
The last and the best.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead.
I feel like I'm actually abusing my audiences because this is the 4th time I've talked about this topic of U.S. ROK alliance. So many of the points that I've made in other sessions will sound maybe familiar to those of you who may have been in some of the other panels. I'm so glad that my two predecessors have so thoroughly covered the issues on the board, because I want to talk a little bit about the alliance more generally and U.S. foreign policy and the issue that the moderator raised so clearly and cleverly, which is this issue of entrapment and the issue of abandonment. And these are not new things in the U.S.-Korea alliance, actually. Those of us who've been working on Korea for a while are quite familiar with these dilemmas. But let me start with the notion that was raised about the world changing and the times changing. I think that is really fundamental for us to think about. When we're in policy circles, we're sort of focused on the next agreement or the next meeting or the next delegation. How are we going to make progress, linearly on some problem? But right now we are in a pretty unique moment, I think, with a lot of changes happening at the same time. And I don't know, we've said that maybe now is a good time to be re-examining the U.S. ROK alliance. I feel like we're always re-examining the U.S. ROK alliance. We don't need to re-examine it too much. It is, as we say, the linchpin. It is a bedrock kind of feature of our thinking, our identity, and our approach in this region. And we've been together now for, as we mentioned in one of the other panels, it's 76 years ago that the Korean War started. We've been together for a long, long time and very, very close. So I do think that the time is changing right now in terms of global power balancing and thinking about foreign policy, particularly in the United States. I feel that we are really in a period of change in terms and re-examination. Obviously, the second election of President Trump has, I think it's a signal to people, if they didn't get it the first time, that the American public is expecting some changes, and whether they come in this administration or a future administration, I expect that there will be some adjustments. That said, in the panel yesterday, no, the day before, I talked about what are the possible outcomes for America's current search for a new purpose for American power in the world, a new foreign policy. And I think there are, a couple of options. One is sort of the, along the lines of quasi-Biden administration effort to join all of our allies together as a kind of a unified force, and that would turn into probably this kind of block-on-block competition, or there's the possibility that the U.S. retrenches to some extent, and there would be maybe more coalition building in the region among middle and other powers to balance against the China challenge. But I would also say that I think the most likely thing is, I don't think the U.S. is going to turn from its alliances. It's part of our national identity. Our alliance structures are extremely popular among the American public, and we are a strong democracy, and I think you will see that coming up in the next election and going forward. And so I think that is really where the ballast of our alliances are felt among people. And it was mentioned that we shouldn't just talk about the alliance as a military structure. It is a people-to-people bonding structure, and it's again, I think the American public has a very positive and very warm view of the alliance. So it will be very difficult for any executive or even legislative, I think, effort to try to diminish that seriously. I do think that this alliance is going to be characterized by greater partnership, greater balance in the contributions to the adventures and ventures that we embark on. And so I think we will see that, and maybe we are already seeing that. But I think this is high time, frankly, and I think most Americans would also say it's high time that we have a more equal partnership. That's going to be tricky. I think both sides would say they want a more equal partnership, but when it comes actually to doing that, they may have different ideas about what that looks like, and that could be a conversation and a thing that we need to work through. And I think the modernization that's on the board here, the discussion about the nuclear submarines, the civil nuclear cooperation, we're going to see that come to the fore. But I think that is where, what I read, sort of the signal of President Trump's approach to foreign policy and the signal that he's getting back from the American people. It's not about isolation. It's not about retrenchment. It's about more equal partnerships and deeper and better partnerships. And we will, I think, see that through line going forward in U.S. policy. I anticipate that. A couple things I wanted to just mention, though, on the abandonment versus entrapment. First of all, before I get to that, on the changes that we're seeing currently, AI and technology are going to probably upend a lot of the things that we think about on a day-to-day basis that we're managing in the alliance, that we're managing around the world, that we're managing in our economies and our societies. And so this is an area where the U.S. and Korea's interests, I think, are very much aligned, and we should be doing a lot more discussion and talking about how we see global management of AI development and what it's going to mean for some of the topics that we're tackling today and the specifics of the modernization of the alliance. But on the entrapment piece, which is the new feature really of the worry, I think here, it's not that new, but it is coming kind of up more and more. I work a lot on U.S.-China relations. I have spent a lot of time on the Taiwan issue, and I just want to say that I think that this issue in the discussion about the ROK, the U.S. ROK alliance is somewhat oversimplified and overblown, frankly. I mean, I understand that, this is a concern. It's something that people are worried about. It's been in all the headlines and in the front of every major news magazine over the last several years, whether it's a timeline of a 2027 invasion or other things that have been mentioned about this scenario. And I do think the Taiwan scenario is really the only one where we could foresee a U.S.-China kind of military conflict come to a head reasonably. So it is the scenario that people worry about, and that's justified. But I do not think that the U.S. is going to precipitately get into a military conflict with China. So given that the U.S. ROK alliance has been steadfast through thick and thin over many kind of external conflicts and conflagrations, Korea has contributed to a lot of different overseas contingency operations that the U.S. has been involved in. Obviously, our history goes back 76 years in this respect. I am quite confident that this issue of entrapment in the scenario that everyone keeps raising is not really the main thing that we should be focused on, even if the military planners are very focused on it. And I think the comparisons with what's going on in the Middle East are not that apt either. So I'm happy to talk more about it, but I'll just leave my comments there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Thornton. Yeah, we are glad that you had a positive prediction and analysis about alliance. But one thing I want to raise the question is Trump. Is it, even though it's not really hiccup or if, Trump goes, they will recover, or alliance, because trust issue it's not just by Middle Easterns. That our country also, it's a rightful concern that wondering. We call it Trump is like a natural disaster, so we can hide and survive, and then it passes away. Everything is okay. I don't think so, but that kind of question still generates a lot of concern here. But I'll get back to you and my other questions. Last presenters, Dr. Lee Sanghyun is now is a fellow emeritus of Sejong Institute, board member of the Institute of Nuclear Materials Management Korea, and also board member of the Asia Pacific Leadership Network, APLN, for nuclear nonproliferation disarmament. He also served as a served at MOPA, and he's a good friend of mine, even though we're kind of different ideological spectrum, but always rational, reasonable. So we go together, we went together so many places, have a discussions, but we never actually emotionally hurt each other. So that's important. We don't hate each other, we respect each other. Okay, yes, your floor.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kim. In fact, I'm more familiar with the title Dr. Kim than Representative Kim. So, one of the disadvantages of being the last speaker is that most of the good part already is spoken by previous commentators. But let me try to be not overlapping too much and focus on the theme of this panel. So alliance modernization. Why do we have to modernize the alliance? It's quite a simple question, but think about when and how this alliance was born after Korean War. And compare that period as today's global turbulent geopolitical circumstances. There is a huge difference. So time has changed, so does alliance change. I think that's the rationale that we have to bother about modernizing the alliance. Of course, some of the difference I see is that quite comprehensive. First of all, let me indicate that already it was indicated that the context, the global geopolitical context of this alliance is already changing. You know that these days many people are talking about the fundamental transition of the global order. In a sense, world order is at a historical turning point. I would say that maybe we are witnessing a transition from the era of US hegemony to a post-hegemonic era, maybe. And because that change is happening because of the change of the US diplomatic and security and global role in these days. Well, we all know that since the Second World War, United States has led the building the so-called rule-based international order, creating many global norms and institutions. And also, US is the country that spent the most of the money to uphold this order. But what Trump is doing these days? He said that US will not pay the money for their taxpayers' money to maintain this a little bit generous order. So that's the reality we are witnessing today. And also, because of that, what would happen if US voluntarily gives up its hegemonic status? The world, it will be more chaotic or more peaceful? That's the big question mark. We don't know yet. But somehow it's quite certain that we will not go back to the golden days of multilateralism. We will not go back to the golden days of free trade. So that's some of the change I witnessed today. And that's exactly the context of this alliance should work in the future. So we need to adapt to this new reality. And also looking at the Korean Peninsula, these days, of course, two Koreas have fought a Korean War in the 1950s. And more than several decades have passed since then. Then what happened between two Koreas? Are we in a peaceful coexistence? No, it's getting more hostile, more unstable, and more cold peace on the Korean Peninsula. And even those Koreas declared that they will not treat South Korea as the same nation anymore. So they also try to advance the so-called two-state theorem, meaning that they will treat the South Korea as a completely different country, and also apply their rules of engagement when in case of the nuclear war happens on the Korean Peninsula, meaning that they can use nuclear weapon against the South Korea. I think that's the part of the reality that this alliance should focus on. And of course, when I say alliance modernization, it's a very comprehensive transformation. It includes, for example, transfer wartime operation control, and increase in South Korea's defense spending to have a more self-reliant forces. And also, South Korea should take the lead in conventional deterrence against North Korea. And South Korea also should contribute more to the containment of China. I think that's the part of the package that both US and Korea is discussing now under the umbrella of the alliance modernization. And because of that, I would say that we already mentioned that this is quite a unique history in period in Korean-US alliance. Both fear of abandonment and fear of entrapment coexist. Quite unique. So far, since the alliance was born, South Korea has unilaterally depended on US security guarantee. So in that sense, most of the time, Korean people have the fear of abandonment from the alliance. But increasingly, alliance is not just a strategic asset, but also it can entail some cost and risk. I think that's some of the reason that alliance modernization is being discussed these days. So for South Korea, another important dimension of that alliance modernization is the changing mission and scope of the USFK and alliance. South Korea considers the primary mission of the alliance to be deterring North Korea and maintaining stability on the Korean Peninsula. But US seems to wish to expand the alliance scope beyond the Korean Peninsula to encompass the whole of Northeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific region. Perhaps you know that what General Xavier Bronson, the commander of the USFK, recently said about this alliance and USFK. He said that South Korea and USFK is like a dagger to counter China. And also, he characterized South Korea as a fixed aircraft carrier located between China and Japan. So this is a kind of a illustration how US policymakers consider the role of this alliance in the future. So I think that's the quite a serious challenge both Washington and Seoul must face and should discuss more frankly in the future. Now let me shift gear to the nuclear issue. Already many people, particularly Eliot, you mentioned about South Korea nuclear-powered submarine. I'm a little bit concerned with the spectrum of the Korean scholars, and Dr. Kim is in the a little bit progressive spectrum. But I have some doubt about the value of the South Korea's nuclear-powered submarine. I think many troubles in the coming years. And think about this. President Trump, Donald Trump, officially endorsed that idea. So it will progress. I think that's for sure. But as you, Eliot, said that it will take much more time than we expect today. Think about on the US side, what's the obstacle? Even though Trump endorsed that idea, who can build a submarine on the US side? Perhaps South Korea should build our own submarine. And also, nuclear fuel is another important issue. As you exactly mentioned, that we may need a separate agreement between U.S. Department of Defense, DOD, and South Korea's National Ministry of Defense for military use of that fuel. And also, on the south, and of course, that's the if you look at the U.S. side, there's a multi-agency project. U.S. State Department, Defense Department, and also Energy Department. Yeah, and also a bunch of the legal framework regulation. I think that's the kind of obstacle we have to overcome on the U.S. side. Then what about the Korean side? Many people are saying that South Korea will very easily build a submarine and make the small reactor to fit in that submarine. But I think that's the kind of a too ambitious idea. Of course, South Korea is has an aspiration to build its own SMR, small nuclear reactor, modular reactor to fit in a submarine. But most of the design is still on the paper only. We need to test that SMR on the ground, and putting that reactor on the submarine is a completely different issue. We also need underwater, very intensive underwater tests that should go pass through. And also, what about the suspicion on Korea from international community about nuclear proliferation concerns? So I believe that the U.S. will never give South Korea HEU like a AUKUS model because of the. But AUKUS model considers that the U.S. will put HEU and completely seal the whole submarine and give it to Australia, right? So unless the case, perhaps South Korea will build a Eliot, low-enriched uranium-based submarine. That's the much more proliferation likely approach, I think. So I think that's another issue that we have to discuss in the coming days. And because of time already past the 10 minutes or so, I will stop here and later talk about civil nuclear cooperation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, we have 23 minutes. I will go to the floor to get questions, but before that, by claiming my privilege to ask as a presider, I cannot ask all of you, but so let me pick Dr. KANG and Professor Thornton. For Dr. KANG, yeah, I think my question is related to Dr. Lee Sanghyun, because this possession of nuclear powered submarine is kind of something of a dream for progressive, or sometimes it's like a counter proposal or alternative to conservatives' desire for nuclear armament. Actually, I don't agree, even though I'm considered as a progressive and I'm a supporter of Lee Jae-myung, but I don't think we need submarine, nuclear power submarine. And this issue related, actually, I want to ask, you said we need a lot of patience to get that. I hope, personally, I hope it actually doesn't come true. Because, deterrence against North Korea is our diesel-powered submarines so powerful. So the fact that we are going to have a nuclear-powered submarine means the implication to counter or to contain China. So this issue is related to strategic flexibility. So, and another point, in 8 months, finally, U.S. Korea got together to talk about this after the summit. And AUKUS still taking time for 5 years after they declared. So, and mood, atmosphere is different between U.S. and Korea. Korea is very kind of hasty, but U.S. is kind of taking time, or sometimes looks like delaying tactics. What do you think?
It certainly is not delaying tactic. But there is a process, right? So, and it requires intensive interagency resource. And as important as our bilateral relationship with Republic of Korea and centrality of our Indo-Pacific strategy, there are a lot of things going on in the world, right? One of the things that well, you were a professor, and we have a number of professors. When I used to teach, and I too was a professor, I used to teach fundamentals of American foreign policy. And I would ask my undergraduate student in particular, well, I would tell this to my undergraduate students. Anybody from any of the Nordic countries or here in the audience? Yes, from Sweden. There we go. Well, at the top, at the decision making, right, and cabinet to the presidency or prime ministry, there's only so much bandwidth, right? But the amount of issues, security-related issues, everything that Sweden deals with, right? That of the United States. I think it is fair to say it's pretty intense in the United States, the range of issues in any given day, right? So there's no purposive delaying tactic or things like this. I mean, just look at the papers, what's been going on in, last year with regard to the Middle East, Ukraine, and everything else. It's the same number of people at the top, right, who are dealing with these issues. Yes, we do have some more bulk than other systems, but it's the intensity of that. So please, let's not overinterpret what's going on.
Thank you very much. And for Professor Thornton, you talked about this, positive side and kind of misconception about the entrapment, but we use very positive term. For example, strategic flexibility, modernization alliance, all sounds good, right? And I know nobody want to use the bad words to plan something, but sometimes we have to think about the risk. I totally understand U.S. perspective, especially these days declining, even though you don't agree. Declining, it's a tyranny of the distance. I think it's perfectly rational for American strategists to upgrade or to expand their allies, US, Japan, Korea, to upgrade capability. At the same time, they want to use us as, best platform to contain China. I think it's a reasonable and rational, but from our perspective, in the old days, the threat perception is the same, so alliance purpose almost identical. But now it diverged, and we witnessed the Middle East, and I think we have a rightful concern to do that.
I think it's on. Yes. I think it is excellent that we have this debate. Korea is a vibrant, robust democracy, and this should be discussed. It's kind of fundamental interests of the nation on something like this nuclear-powered submarines. It's so interesting that you both said that you're in different so-called camps, but that you both doubt the utility of the nuclear-powered submarine. I mean, cost-benefit analysis should be done. This is an expensive, long-term project. It's a strategic project, and on the part of the Korean government, the Korean National Assembly, this kind of cost-benefit look at what you are doing is something in a democracy, in my view, that should be encouraged, and I would hope that people in my own government do a lot more cost-benefit analysis of various, policy decisions that are being made. So I am a big proponent of that. On the other issue, the strategic flexibility, so-called, I mean, yeah, I in a way, we can never come up with the right answer. I mean, everything has two sides. And, I think, frankly, when you speak with Korean officials and even Korean people, they do feel a certain amount of challenge coming from China. And it's not fair to assume that the US will take on the whole burden of that particular challenge that Korea feels. So Korea should contribute to that. That's what I mean by a more equal partnership. And I think that's the sentiment that you hear from Americans. It doesn't mean that, you know, tomorrow there's going to be in World War III and, you know, you should expect to be embroiled in that. I personally believe that that is not what's going to happen. And I really hope, I mean, for young people that are still in the room, if you think about what we're dealing with now and all the problems we've been talking about today, many of these things are legacies of World War II, which happened almost 100 years ago. So it tells you how major the consequences are of a global conflagration of that sort happening again. And they'll be even worse, and they'll last even longer. And I mean, this has been our entire lifetime. Many of us were children of the Cold War, and then the Cold War ending, and now sort of the new century. And we still have all of these problems left over from, frankly, 1945, which were not concluded. And so I think if I can give you any message today, it's to avoid World War III, because this will take up a whole nother century of problems that we'll have to be dealing with. But I do think that we can come up with a reasonable solution that doesn't feel as if Korea is being somehow abused. And let's remember, the primary purpose of the alliance is still there. You know, it's North Korea. And Korea makes that very clear every time the Americans come to talk about more strategic flexibility. You won't let us forget what the primary mission is. And I think you can have the primary mission, but also recognize that, like we've all said, the world is changing. And I don't think we'll be unfair about that. And I think we can come to an agreement. We're close enough. I think we can come to a reasonable agreement.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 30 minutes, so I'm going to give an opportunity to floor to ask questions. If the questions are short and the answer is short, we can give more opportunity to you. Okay, and short introduction of yourself and then ask questions.
Yes, thank you. My name is Joel Petschanive. I'm Swedish, as I said, but with the Asia Pacific Leadership Network based in Seoul. I won't do a big prelude. You didn't speak a lot about civilian nuclear cooperation. This is obviously a big subject of discussions between the US and Korea right now. So this is mostly aimed towards Vice Minister Chung, but also to Dr. Lee. And this is about the form of reassurances that the Korean government of today can make, that the enrichment and reprocessing capabilities that Korea will acquire today will not be misused by a government in the future. Thanks.
So thank you for the question. Both ROK and US are absolutely committed to upholding non-proliferation regime and strengthening it. I think we've been a model state for non-proliferation safeguards. Even if either party, mostly Korea, wanted to do something improper with the nuclear technology that, or the materials that we'll be accessing in the future, I don't think it will be possible because we are working with the United States. We have no intention of starting a nuclear arms race in the region, absolutely not. So I think the premise is very firm that we are staunchly both in agreement that this is purely for civilian purposes, and there's no benefit to Korea to start this nuclear arms race here in the region.
Okay. Okay. If you can specify the panel, yeah.
So my name is Junseok Ko, and I am undergraduate student in political science at Jeju National University. So first of all, thank you for sharing your valuable insights. So I have some question regarding the submarines. So nuclear power submarines could be the significant milestone for the Korean Navy to becoming into their capability from the Green Water Navy to the Blue Water Navy. And it might surely involve the change of regional security environment in Indo-Pacific or narrowly the Asia-Pacific. So then if the enriched fuel for the submarines is come from the U.S. and technology transfer needs U.S. approval, and it operated under the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. So I think the dilemma happens between the reinforcing strategic autonomy of Republic of Korea and raising dependence on the U.S. So how to break this dilemma?
Okay. So if South Korea possess nuclear power submarine, that's right. As you mentioned, perhaps the South Korean Navy will go blue water and very far. But for what? That's the fundamental question. So far, South Korean government always said that the key goal of the South Korean nuclear power submarine is tracking on those Korean submarine, maybe nuclear powered or not, around the vicinity of the Korean Peninsula. And most people believe that a nuclear powered submarine is a long range platform. Okay, it's not just for working on the vicinity of the Korean Peninsula. So there's some perception gap between Korean government and the U.S. government. As I said, maybe I may be wrong, but I believe U.S. will think South Korean nuclear powered submarine should go far beyond the Korean Peninsula and do something maybe very uncomfortable job for Korea, like tracking China's submarine on the Taiwan Strait. Can we afford to do that? So I think that's still not decided, I think. So that's the one point that Korea and US should discuss in the future. Now, my point is like this. Weapon is the kind of instrument for purpose of the war or political purpose. And it seems to me South Korea's discussion, controversy in South Korea, it is a little bit reversed. Weapon first and strategy later. But it's not the correct way of obtaining that expensive weapon platform. So many people, some people even say that, oh, South Korea demand that nuclear power submarine. It may be just the expensive prestige purpose. Okay, so that's the sum of the point that I mentioned is that first the priority is that both U.S. and South Korea should decide what purpose do we need, and U.S. will allow a nuclear power submarine in which area and for what purpose. I think that's the number one priority that we should discuss. Of course, the other details like where to build, how fuel will be supplied, and who will maintain that, because South Korea cannot handle nuclear material. Okay, so I think that's the somewhat discussion. That's why I say that it will be very complicated and much longer term project that than we expect.
So final question for you guys, okay? And how many points are you giving for when assessing U.S. ROK alliance from 0 to 100 scale at this moment, and then why? A short question as a conclusion of your panel. Very short answers. It's hard? Okay, starting from the last one.
Well, the important point is not the grade itself, but the trend is decreasing. That's what I'm concerned. So I would like to say it may be 85 point, but is downgrading. So unless we pay attention, perhaps it will be irreversibly very damaging to alliance.
Okay, I'm 85, but I think that we should be more confident. You know, democracies, we love to criticize ourselves. We're always complaining about everything, how bad things are. But actually, if you look at what we've built over the last 76 years and all the opportunities that we have coming from AI, from technology, from the economic partnership, I think we're going to be fine. And I wish for all of us to have more confidence in each other.
So higher the better, right? No, 100%. No, I mean, because the interest and the security environment is the same. why did the United States intervene in the Korean War, right? It's the fundamental interest only has increased because Korea is a democracy, right? There's freedom of speech, right? We all share this. Some of it may be under threat, but we have it. And the security threat remains the same. And now Korea is economically critical to the United States, 110%.
I would have to agree with Dr. Kang, 110, 120%, because I really believe that successful alliances do not endure because they resist change, but they endure because they adapt to change. And I think we've been remarkable at adapting to unprecedented changes over the years. And I've seen the earnestness and seriousness of our US colleagues coming in to consult on these difficult issues, as well as the energy that they bring, and the quality of consultation has just been exemplar. And I believe we can work through any difficulties through these close consultations. So,
thank you very much. Time's almost up. Thank you for the wonderful presentation and the cooperation from the floor and audience. I had no time to talk about Afghan transfer, 전작권 환수. I'm really worried about this and some diversion between the U.S. and ROK, especially President Lee Jae-myung wants to regain the control next year, but U.S. is reluctant or talking about the 2028. And 박근혜 actually changed the criteria from timeline to conditions. Those conditions I don't want to repeat here, but it's so hard to achieve. So I think this is the time. We originally talked about the transfer of outcome because of cost sharing, and U.S. wanted to give it away to save the money, but now it's different phase. They don't want to give up their initiative or control, if I say so. If I am allowed to say, and I think this issue becomes a problem. So we have to give attention to that, and because it is going to impact on our lives too. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Thank you everybody.